Good evening and warm greetings from our Auckland Park studios. Welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Catch us live on SABC Plus app, DSTV's Audio Bouquet Channel 802 and OpenView Channel 628. I'm Thabiso Lehoko, and let's have a look at stories that made headlines today. The World Food Programme has accused paramilitary forces in Sudan's civil war of repeatedly shelling its warehouses in the besieged city of El Fasher. More than 500 civilians have been killed and tens of thousands displaced as a result of fighting in the besieged capital of the North Darfur region. The BBC's Anne Soy has more.
The World Food Programme has condemned the repeated targeting of its premises in El Fasher. The agency's staff were unharmed in the attack. Aid groups are rushing to stock up on supplies ahead of the rainy season when roads get cut off. Community volunteers in El Fasher have warned that the living conditions are disastrous. Markets are mostly empty and food prices have skyrocketed. A sack of the staple millet is going for $1,000. Fighting has intensified in recent weeks as RSF seeks to overrun the only city in Darfur still under the army's control.
Former DRC President Joseph Kabila appeared for the first time in public in rebel-held territory in the country's volatile East, meeting with religious leaders in what participants said was a push for peace. Sean Hogan has more.
He is wanted in Congo for alleged crimes against humanity for supporting the insurgency in the east, including a role in the massacre of civilians. Bishop of Goma, Joel Amurani, said Kabila's message in their meeting was a push for peace.
You can note that the former president of the Republic called us to express his wish to see peace return to this eastern part first and throughout the entire national territory. His wish is that peace be restored, national cohesion, but also living together. That is briefly what he told us in his message.
Kabila has been vowing for weeks to return to Congo to help find a solution to the conflict. But this week, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi's government accused Kabila of positioning himself as the rebel leader, along with Rwanda's President Paul Kagame.
Barrick Mining has asked the Arbitration Tribunal of the World Bank to intervene in legal proceedings in Mali as the miner faces the possibility of the Luolo-Gounkoto mine falling under the control of the Mali government. Mali, in this move, comes as the court is expected to rule on the 2nd of June on the government's request to put the Canadian miner gold mine under a provisional administration. Mabu Boloka has more.
Barrick's gold mine in Mali has been shut since January this year after Mali seized 3 tons of gold from its mine over non-payment of taxes. Barrick has disputed the allegations. If the Mali ruling goes in favor of the government, an individual or organization will be assigned to take over the mine and reopen it. Barrick has now applied to the tribunal for an order requiring the Mali government to refrain from taking any further action.
The United Nations has warned that the entire population of the Gaza Strip is at risk of famine. UN Humanitarian Agency spokesperson Jens Locke says Gaza is on the verge of catastrophe. He has accused Israel of blocking all but a trickle of humanitarian aid since partially lifting a blockade earlier this month.
This limited number of truckloads that are coming in is a trickle. It is drip feeding food into an area on the verge of catastrophic hunger. It's not a flood. Gaza is the hungriest place on earth.
Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari has approved a bill that aims to eradicate child marriages in the capital territory of Islamabad. Under the new legislation, the minimum age for marriage is 18 for both males and females. The BBC's Barasan Tirajan has the details.
The UN Children's Agency says Pakistan is home to an estimated 19 million child brides, one of the highest figures in the world. For decades, activists and politicians have been trying to stop the practice while facing resistance from religious hardliners. According to the new law, underage marriage will be treated as a criminal offence in Islamabad and the surrounding area. Family members, clerics and registrars who facilitate or coerce children into early marriage will face up to 7 years imprisonment. The previous legal age for marriage was 16 for girls and 18 for men.
France's Health and Family Minister Catherine Vautrin has announced that smoking in public spaces where children could be present will be banned from July. The BBC's Isabella Joel explains.
So this new law will ban smoking in areas accessed by children. So that means from the 1st of July, people in France will no longer be allowed to smoke in public places. So that means beaches, public parks and gardens, areas around schools, bus shelters and sports facilities. This comes just ahead of the World Health Organization's annual World No Tobacco Day, which is this Saturday, and aims to draw attention to the dangers of smoking.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Thabiso Lehoko.
Channel Africa.
If you've just tuned in, welcome to it. It is Channel Africa. I'm Thabiso Lehoko standing in for Thabiso Lehoko. Now follow us on social media for updates, highlights and exclusive content. On X, it's at Channel Africa 1. Facebook, we are Channel Africa. On Instagram, it's at Channel Africa 1. And on TikTok, it's at Channel Africa 1. And on YouTube, we are Channel Africa 1. The Department of Higher Education and Training in South Africa has come under scrutiny after the minister in charge was forced to withdraw controversial appointments to crucial training bodies. The minister received a backlash over the appointments of politically connected individuals, including the son of African National Congress National Chairperson and Mineral Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe. Dimakatsolo Shuru has the details.
It was a tense session on Friday with members of parliament wanting answers that the minister refused to give. Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Nobuhle Ngabane, maintained there was nothing wrong with the list of people she had appointed to chair boards of various SETAs. A Sector Education and Training Authority, or SETA in short, is a body responsible for managing and creating skills development programs and training in various sectors with huge budget allocations. There are 21 such SETAs and they account to the minister. 2 weeks ago, the minister withdrew the appointments following a public outcry that some of these individuals have political links to the African National Congress, including a former premier. Ngabane told parliamentarians that her process to appoint these individuals was beyond reproach.
We saw what was trending on social media. After seeing those trends on social media, I took it upon me as a responsible citizen to say, let me listen, what is the outcry about? Then I could pick up that amongst the issues, in particular from Honorable Khawkhaw, is that the recommended candidates to serve as chairs, they are viewed or perceived to be more political bloated. However, I must also put it on record that the panel recommended highly qualified candidates, and I was happy to see and to share with the portfolio committee today their profiles. There is nothing illegal about it. There are no flaws. There is no breach of any legislative imperative. Everything was followed, and the process was beyond reproach.
Ngabane was taken to task about the panel of advisors that she says did the selection process. She refused to disclose the names or any details of the panel. And members of the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Training didn't take kindly to her refusal to disclose this information. Sihle Lonzi is a member of the Economic Freedom Fighters in Parliament.
I'm not going to say the process had flaws, because where am I going to base that argument from? The process was run by a credible and reputable independent panel.
Now, I've got a problem when you say you cannot give us the names of these panelists. is a shadow government. There are people who are taking very serious decisions on behalf of the ministry, on behalf of the department, and clearly you as a minister, you take these people very seriously because you listen to their recommendations. But you're saying, I can't give you the names of these people. Who are these people? Why must they not be told to the people of South Africa? We need to know, who are they? What if they are your friends? What if they are your family members? What if these people even themselves are of questionable character? Because this is a public institution. It's not a private company. You are saying to us, you have a secret panel. The people of South Africa must know, where are decisions of higher education taken? Because of time, I'm asking you a yes or no question.
I'm not going to respond to yes or no. I'm not in court.
No, this is not a court.
I'm not in court. I'm not going to respond to yes or no.
None of the minister's delegation, including a representative of the National Security Agency, knew anything about the secret panel that advises the minister. Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament Karabo Kakao called the minister arrogant.
Minister, at the heart of public service is selflessness. It is an absolute blessing to be given a position of a minister that oversees not only SETAs that are responsible for empowering young people, but overseeing institutions that make or break the lives of young people. You would assume that people who come and take office do so with one interest only, the people, and forget about their political loyalties. You can be loyal to your political manifesto, but you can't be loyal to the stomachs of cadres.
The meeting degenerated with the minister sticking to her guns and parliamentarians frustrated.
And I'm happy to see, Honorable Ngubane, that you can pick up that it was wrong for politicians to serve in those boards. Because with yourself, you served in 2 boards of SETAs when you yourself was a leader of the African National Congress. I'm happy when you can see those things that are wrong today, the things that the collapsing system that you are speaking about today, you were part of it. I'm happy and I'm taking note, at least when you're talking from experience, because you're part of the mess that we're trying to resolve today.
The nomination process has now been reopened, inviting nominations. Minister Ngabane says even the names that caused the public outcry would be considered again if they applied. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Today we are turning our attention to a major milestone in regional unity and cooperation, the 50th anniversary of the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. Leaders and delegates from across the region gathered in Lagos, Nigeria, this week to reflect on 5 decades of economic collaboration and progress, to help us unpack the significance of this milestone and what it means for the future of West Africa. We're joined from London by Paul Ejime, a seasoned international affairs analyst, journalist, and a leading voice on ECOWAS and African geopolitics. Mr. Paul Ejime, welcome to the SABC's Channel Africa this evening.
Thank you, Thabiso. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'd like to actually ask the very same question to you. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and watching the weather. You know, in Britain, the weather can be unpredictable, but we're having summer and a bit of sunshine, which is very good. We don't know how long it will last, but we enjoy it while it lasts.
Here we're ushering in the winter.
Yes, okay. We are here. It's getting to summer here. Okay.
Now, ECOWAS, a regional economic and political unit, is now celebrating its 50th anniversary. I'd like you to tell us about the significance of this and how significant is it for West Africa today?
So, ECOWAS, well, for those of you in Southern Africa, you perhaps at one point you will be, looking at ECOWAS with some, drawing some inspiration from what it was doing, because it was doing quite well after Nigeria's civil war. the leader, General Yakubu Gowon, who happens to be the only surviving founding father of ECOWAS, good to know, he's almost 90 or thereabouts. So he, with his colleague in Togo, the late General Yadema, they put us together to say, listen, let's that charity begins at home. They wanted to get the region, their neighborhood, like a concentric circle. You talk about the nation, and then your neighbor, and the region, continent, and then before you talk about the whole world. So they decided to say, well, let them strengthen cooperation and collaboration, like you have said, on the economic front. So that was why they all gathered 50 years ago on the 28th of May 1975 to sign that historic Treaty of Lagos, which they reenacted a few days ago on the 28th, marking that milestone. But it hasn't been, smooth sailing for ECOWAS. Initially, like I said, it was set up as an economic, to foster economic integration and then other issues. But before you knew it, political and security issues took over. There was a war that broke out in Liberia in 1989, December, where rebels wanted to topple the government of Master Sergeant Doe, Charles Taylor. So ECOWAS now had to more or less put economic issues in the aside and began to fight these fires, because after Liberia it was Sierra Leone and so on and so forth. So many countries have come under that kind of political instability, and ECOWAS has been struggling between remaining steady on its objective of fostering economic progress and development, and then also looking at the security, because I think both are really, there is a nexus between security, peace and security, and economic development. One, you can't have one without the other. In fact, you can't have economic development without stability. So that has been the history of ECOWAS. They have done it with some success and international acclaim, to the point that other regional economic communities like SADC, East African Economic Community, Central African Economic Community. Africa has about 8 of it, but it was ECOWAS that was actually showing the way. But in the last 10, 15 years, the problem of sit-tight government and bad governance crept in, what you call civilian coups, where leaders will be tinkering with their national constitution, changing the laws, and then rigging election, and no longer delivering, actually deviating from the objectives and dreams of the founding father.
Mr. Ejime, let me come in there now that you have touched on the aspects of political instability, security, as well as, in recent times, for the past 10 years or so, we've been seeing military takeovers in that part of the region, ECOWAS. And ECOWAS in particular has been blamed, for not strengthening its efforts in fostering peace in the region. Has ECOWAS, in your view, fulfilled the vision of unity set out in the 1975 Treaty of Lagos?
I would say it's not easy to say yes or no, but I would say that to some extent, it has been able to do so. For instance, if you remember some of the policies and then achievements like the free movement, ECOWAS has, I think, was the first in all for the regional economy, Africa Economic Regional Communities, to have free visa, that the citizens of any country can go anywhere within the community of the 15 member states and stay for at least the initial 90 days without visa. And they can also pursue it and ask for a right of residence and establishment. That has helped and there is a trade liberalization scheme. Most of the trade in this region is done, informal, itinerant traders crossing from one border to the other. It hasn't been, it's not as effective or as seamless as people will want it to be. But at least the fact that ECOWAS is today 50. Remember that some regional or similar organization had, sprang up, but they also died. So, but that is not to say that ECOWAS will continue to, rely on its past achievement. It is that ECOWAS is being judged by its own standard. That at one point it used to manage coups, and then in conflict prevention, management and resolution, it was that was where it got its teeth. But ironically, that is also what is now becoming a problem for ECOWAS, because 4 of these 15 countries are now under military regime. That is after the region moved from dictatorship, because that was where they started from 1970-80, if you remember. Many countries were under military regime, but they were able to exit that, transit to democracy. Whether it was perfect or not is another matter. But before 2020, all the 15 member countries were operating one form of democratic system or the other. Until 2020, when the coup happened in Mali, then followed by Guinea, then Burkina Faso, and then Niger, the last one in quick succession, to the point that 3 of the countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have now formed what they call Alliance of Sahel States, pulling out of ECOWAS, which is not a good development. So ECOWAS will have to go back, return to the drawing board to see what it is not doing right. But for me, it is question of leadership. Leadership at the national level and then regional level has not been as effective as it ought to be. So that gap has been the albatross for ECOWAS, and Nigeria, the powerhouse, has also not been as powerful or as effective or influential as it used to be, using its oil money. Remember that he used it effectively to support African liberation. Some countries in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and all of them, Mozambique, most of them, and even fighting apartheid. Nigeria was was in front. But today, because of the economic and geopolitical shifts, Nigeria is also feeling the pinch. And I think in that innovation, they have the ECOWAS and the countries have to be innovative. The leaders, they have to reinvent themselves and then re-strategize to be able to make sure that they recover from this setback that they are now having.
Now, of course, and we see that it has been happening a great deal, whereby one would say maybe the poles are shifting in West Africa, especially given the emergence of world powers such as Russia and China. But I'll touch a little bit later on, before I let you go, on Russia and China's going into West Africa. Let's now shift back to the 50th anniversary. The significance, what is the significance of General Gowon's involvement in this celebration, and who is General Gowon?
Gowon was the Nigerian military leader that the leadership of the country fell on him after the 1966 coup. When the Eastern Nigeria tried to break up. So Nigeria, from 1968, Gowon became the head of state. And then Colonel Ojukwu became the head of Biafra, Republic. But that republic lasted for only 30 months. That ended the civil war in favor of the federal government of Nigeria. And so Gowon took, from that 68 until 1975 when he was toppled because he kept, he couldn't, carry out a transition from military rule to civilian rule. I think that was the reason that was given for his, removal while he was in, I think he was attending an OAU meeting in Kampala. And so he went on to go, he left and went to school and returned and came back after so many years. And so he is now a statesman. And people look upon him for the fact that he was able to have that vision, that, insight to get the region together. Remember that in West Africa, there are so many former colonial masters, and I know you are coming, you will get there very soon. The French, the Germans, Britain, and everybody was there, and it created problem. You know what the colonialists do? They divide. There is in 1888 and 1884, 85. Remember the Berlin scramble for Africa. So that has affected Africa, colonialism, and then slave trade. These were things that you had very artificial boundaries. Countries or people that were the same had, some artificial boundaries dividing them and so on. But the issue now is Africa has been independent. Most of the African countries have been independent for more than 60 years. I think they shouldn't continue to hammer on these roadblocks. They should have moved on. So African leaders of today also have their own blame for what is happening to the continent, why the continent is not moving. And that has affected ECOWAS. So the resources is, are there. Manpower is there. So what is holding Africa down? And like Madiba used to say, that if Nigeria has to be fixed before Africa can wake up, I think the rest of the world are waiting on Nigeria. Nigeria has its own domestic problem, elections contested, and then the population more than 200 million, and then it's really very difficult the leadership has not provided the kind of vision and then leadership that the Nigerians and some Africans and even the world will want Nigeria to be. So it's still a work in progress.
Mr. Ejima, it seems like ECOWAS has a lot, and it seems as if maybe one would say too many demons facing it. And the recent coups in West Africa have somehow spoke of an instability which now finds ECOWAS kind of losing its credibility. Now we are also seeing in West Africa, whereby I spoke about the emergence in politics of Russia and China going into West Africa. Won't Russia going into West Africa in a manner in which it is have a bearing on ECOWAS, given ECOWAS's linkages to the French?
Very much so. I mean, the point is that 8 of the 15 ECOWAS member countries were former French colonies. Okay? So, France, let's face it, France has always been fighting for political influence in West Africa. Not only West Africa, Africa as a whole. Because there is a saying that if the African East former colonies provide the oxygen, and that is, keeping the French economy alive. So, and they are going to do everything to make sure that they stick to it. But unfortunately, there has now been a groundswell of anti-French sentiments in these former colonies because of the policy. You know, there were agreements that were signed that didn't really favor the African citizens, but were just to further French interests. And that is why the coup leaders in these 4 countries appear to have been, that's what they are riding on. The fact that the citizens are against France because of his policies. So France, the French troops and soldiers have been expelled, the ambassadors, diplomatic relations have been taught because of that. But still, most of these about 7 of these countries are still using the French CFA franc that is, controlled by France. And that is the issue. That many of these countries were really not independent, because you can't give them the flag as a political, say you are free politically, while you are holding on to their economy. And that is what has caused a problem. So it has affected ECOWAS in no small measure. Like I said, 8 of his members were former French colonies. Now we talk about geopolitical shift and then the strategy that has happened. When ECOWAS was set up, you didn't have terrorism, you didn't have all these violent extremism or banditry or transnational crimes were not as obvious. But today that has happened, and the political equation has also changed. Today you don't seem to have unanimity among the nations. I think the countries America is going its way, European countries are doing their thing, and then Russia and China are also doing their thing. So why these countries are now trying to sever ties with France? Russia and China are moving in to take up the space that the West and America were occupying. And that is for their own national interest too. Yes. You can't blame them for fighting for their own national interests. But Africans to come, together and strategize to be able to maximize their own benefit in whatever they are doing, be it in trade. They should stop receiving handouts. Africa can trade. Africa can compete. Africa has minerals, gold, diamond, uranium is found in Niger, for instance. But that has benefited French companies more than it has done Niger. Niger is in, much of it is in darkness, while French companies that are exploiting these resources are using it to power, the French economy.
Mr. Ejime, yes, I would like us to actually stop it right there, as the show producer has indicated that we have actually overran our course. Nonetheless, thank you very much for joining Channel Africa this evening with those nuggets and valuable knowledge that you have given us.
Thank you very much. Well, it's really not, you can't talk about 50 years in less than 20 minutes, but that's media and broadcasting for you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mr. Ejime. That was Paul Ejime, seasoned international affairs analyst, journalist, and a leading voice on ECOWAS and African geopolitics, joining us on the line from London.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
The Shy Guy, a Morning Switch.
Have you ever listened to a song and then it gives you goosebumps? Cause it takes you way back in the 80s. My goodness. Hey baby. You hear Yvonne Chaga Chaga there. I wanna talk to the DJ. And then the DJ goes like, hey baby, I've got you on the other side. Huh? There were no WhatsApps then, right? There were no sliding in the TMs at the time. Oh man.
Your weekend mornings are activated with the Shy Guy on the Morning Switch. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thabiso Lehoko, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thabiso unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Thabiso Lehoko.
Channel Africa.
Tomorrow is World No Tobacco Day. And this year's theme, Unmasking the Appeal, calls out how the tobacco industry glamorizes nicotine products to attract young people. Joining us tonight is Dr. Olivia Wakowski, Associate Professor at the Rutgers School of Public Health and expert at the Rutgers Institute for Nicotine and Tobacco Studies. She now joins us live from New York to talk to us about how tobacco companies use social media, misleading language, and a sleek marketing to hook a new generation. Dr. Wakowski, welcome to Channel Africa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be a part of this.
You're welcome. This topic, many people want to, and some don't want to talk about it. What makes a tobacco product features like bright colors, sleek designs, and flavors so appealing to young people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, these are really features that can attract young people's attention and make young people feel like these products are meant for them, are relevant for them. And if you think about it, these are features that are not necessarily unique to tobacco as a category. We see bright colors and sleek designs and flavorings in other types of categories that are also appealing to kids and to young people. You think about cereals and junk foods and sports drinks. They make use of a lot of bright colors and flavorings. And so those same kinds of features are also present in tobacco marketing, and the tobacco industry is aware of this and knows this and is using similar kinds of tactics.
But here it is, and it's forging ahead. Do these features lead youth to believe these products are less harmful than they really are?
Yeah, they can really work to distract young people from the actual harmfulness of the products, right? Because when you're looking at a beautiful tobacco package, something that has either bright colors or a nice sort of sleek modern design, you're distracted from thinking about the harmfulness of the actual product, the harmfulness, the fact that this is really this addictive and deadly product. And you're also not as likely to really read or pay attention to the warning labels that might be on the pack, the warning labels that make you think about those risks. And when it comes to things like flavors, we know that flavorings can mask the natural harshness of tobacco, like the harshness of smoking cigarettes. So we know that when young people first try smoking, it's naturally harsh and makes you want to cough. But when you add flavorings, things like menthol flavorings, it makes that tobacco, that smoke, feel much smoother and cooler. It makes it easier to smoke, and then it naturally doesn't feel as harmful.
Let's talk about the social media campaigns when it comes to these tobacco products. Would you say that these companies are using an aggressive style of an approach, or maybe they've lessened, given that there has been awareness created around this and probably many, many court appearances? Do you think that they're using an aggressive kind of approach?
I think social media is quite prominent now. You know, it used to be different kinds of marketing, magazine advertising, things like that. But social media is a current style of advertising. And so it's really interesting because, you know, we're seeing in studies that these are promoted on platforms like Instagram and TikTok and different kinds of platforms. And it consists of both branded content as well as user-generated content that's a little more subtle. And tobacco companies do make use of influencer partnerships, and they use a lot of visuals that are not necessarily talking about direct health claims, but instead they're kind of portraying tobacco in a sort of lifestyle fashions, portraying them as trendy and modern and socially acceptable, showing pictures of them, of people in nightlife and restaurants, in clubs with music, right? So it's kind of trying to make it seem like this attractive product, attractive lifestyle, and a lot of that is happening on social media right now.
The restrictions on packaging and advertising, could those reduce this widespread influence?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do. We can minimize, we can make it harder for young people to be exposed to tobacco marketing in the first place, right? So we can put restrictions on where tobacco advertising is allowed to be placed. We can also make use of things like age gating features. So, for example, requiring people to register or show proof of age in order to see some sort of online content. We see that in some brand websites and some social media platforms, but it's not necessarily always consistent across different brands or consistent across different platforms, and there's not a lot of enforcement of it. In terms of tobacco packaging, we can also do a lot more to strengthen our warning labels on product packaging to make them more prominent. We know that strong warning labels can help people to better understand the risks of tobacco products, and they can also work well to detract from the appeal and attractiveness of the product packaging, which is part of the marketing itself. In some countries, we've seen, the restrictions have gone even farther by requiring plain packaging, meaning that the packs have to make use of some sort of neutral color and don't feature any logos or claims or designs on those packs. So those are several tools that we have to restrict marketing.
Can you take us through some of the counter-marketing strategies that have been out there in an effort to deter young people from getting too much involved?
Yeah. So this is a great question. I was actually inspired to get into this field of work by a counter-marketing campaign in the early 2000s in the US that was called the Truth Campaign, which was all about exposing the ways in which the tobacco industry works and kind of how it was marketing its deadly products to people and manipulating the products in certain ways to make them more addictive, and kind of how the industry talked about its consumers behind closed doors. So these kinds of sort of industry exposure campaigns have worked well historically. More recently, with the rise of use in e-cigarettes, we've seen various campaigns, including here in the US, really focused on kind of highlighting what the risks of e-cigarettes are, how addictive they can be, how they can contain harmful chemicals, all in a way to counter the attractive features of e-cigarette advertising that we see. And we've seen that these kinds of anti-e-cigarette, these sort of health awareness campaigns have been pretty successful as well.
Sure. With these e-cigarettes, all I've seen is a huge smoke coming out when people use them. That's what I actually get to see.
Yes.
Now, what's the most urgent action policymakers should take this World No Tobacco Day?
Yeah, well, I would say a few things. First, I would say that policymakers should be sure to support continued funding for campaigns and programs that are already working well. That's one thing. I would say it's also important for policymakers to focus on enforcement of existing restrictions around marketing that may already be in place. It's one thing to actually get a policy, but then we really need to enforce it in order for it to be effective. And then lastly, I think that this is a good opportunity, good timing for policymakers to think about relevant ways to expand marketing restrictions. So that could include things that we talked about, such as strengthening warning labels, expanding restrictions on exposure. It could include certain flavor bans. And they can also think about adopting or strengthening other related policies that we know also work well to address youth use, like tobacco age of sale laws, as well as taxes on tobacco products that work to make products more expensive for young people to buy, and that also discourages use among young people.
Fine. Dr. Olivia Wakoski, thanks for availing yourself this evening to talk about this.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was Dr. Olivia Wakoski, Associate Professor at the Rutgers School of Public Health and expert at the Rutgers Institute for Nicotine and Tobacco Studies, joining us live from New York.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
A Mauritanian appeals court has this week handed down a 15-year prison sentence and a hefty $3 million fine to the country's former president Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz for corruption, money laundering and illicit self-enrichment. The ruling upholds and escalates an earlier conviction from 2023, marking a significant moment in Mauritania's efforts to tackle high-level corruption.
In terms of the country fighting corruption, I think this case shows the seriousness of the country in trying to fight corruption. There is substantial evidence that indicates to the fact that he was corrupt. These cases are always very difficult to then be able to balance whether they're not politically motivated and also balancing the rule of law.
Nyasha Mpani, who's a project leader at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Thabiso Lehoko.
Channel Africa.
South Africa's Trade and Industry Minister Pakstau has stressed the need to strengthen the political administrative interface to boost government performance and service delivery. Speaking to Channel Africa at a presidential roundtable in Pretoria, Dau said the initiative supports the National Development Plan's goal of building a capable state. He also reflected on South Africa's recent U.S. trade mission, calling it a success and highlighting how strong investor interest is. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe spoke with Trade Minister Pakstau.
Well, I think firstly it's important that we improve the capacity of the state to deliver on its mandate, and what the DP has convened is a forum that seeks to build cohesion within the state in terms of political and administrative interface, in terms of output, and in terms of intergovernmental relations. So it's a very important initiative just to ensure that the state functions better and that it functions optimally.
We are talking about investments. You travel to the US to main relations led by the President, you and Minister Steenhuisen and Minister Shabeni. In terms of trade, Minister, are we looking good in luring investors into our country after the sour relations that we had with the US?
Well, firstly, I think that it is important to acknowledge the feedback that we've received from South Africans with regards to the visit to the US. It's been quite positive to the extent that it demonstrates the extent to which South Africa is invested in the issue of trade, of investment, of economic growth, and of course our bilateral relations with the United States of America. I think it's important that we start by acknowledging the extent of investments by the USA in the South African economy. The US is the second largest trading partner to South Africa. It has 600 plus companies that are invested in the South African economy, and there's greater appetite by American enterprises to invest in the South African economy. So they are an important trading partner. It's important that we nurture and build a relationship with the US. Of course, at the same time, you need to diversify your trade partners, but start by consolidating those that you have. On the basis of the proposal that we put before the US, we anticipate that we would get feedback. The preliminary feedback was quite positive. Of course, we need to engage on the detail in terms of what the future has in store in terms of our trading relationships. And that is about mutual benefit. We went there and said our approach in going to the US is to ensure that there's mutual benefit to both countries. And in our context, it's also about benefit for the African continent. We did not leave behind the importance of AGOA in our engagements.
On that AGOA, how are things looking?
We essentially are engaging. The U.S. administration said it's important that we also engage with the Senate and Congress, and therefore these engagements would be continued.
That was Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe speaking with South Africa's Minister of Trade, Paksa Dau. Ahead of International Children's Day this Sunday, 1st of June, the spotlight is on the safety and well-being of young people, particularly those living in high-risk environments. In South Africa, a safety awareness campaign focusing on electricity was launched this week at Umthambeka Primary School in Tembisa, east of Johannesburg. Electronics company Hisense and led the initiative aiming to create long-term impact in under-resourced communities. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange attended the launch and filed this report.
I learned about how electricity works, and you don't have to touch electricity when it's plugged. You will get choked.
I learned not to play with electricity because it's very dangerous. You can get hurt or die.
At a time when winter increases the risk of household fires and electrical accidents, learners at Umthambeka Primary School were taken through real-life safety demonstrations. The activation was led by Hisense, South Africa's technical team, which operates nearby in Ekurhuleni. Luna Nokia, Deputy General Manager at Hisense SA, says this was a community-led effort rooted in social responsibility.
We really deeply care about our communities where we operate. For instance, our factory is in Atlantis. We take care of the community there. Our service center is here in Tembisa, and we know about the needs of the community. And it's a small drop in the ocean, we know that too. But where we can make a difference, we try to make a difference and to continue making a difference. And even though it's something small, it's meaningful to us, and I know it's meaningful to the teachers, it's meaningful to the children.
The team focused on how children interact with electricity in everyday spaces, at home, in classrooms, and during winter when heating solutions are often unsafe. Nokia says choosing this particular school was a matter of geography and impact.
We are literally 5 kilos away from here, and we hope that, when the kids grow up and they want to learn a little bit more about how to do repairs and all of that, they'll come visit us at our training center as well. We know from experience that nothing lasts until you form a habit and that things are consistent. So if we consistently contribute in whichever way we can, be it just to take them on a tour of the service center or giving them something substantial, but being consistent, coming back here.
For the primary school, where many learners come from under-resourced homes, the initiative couldn't have come at a better time. Acting Principal Jerry Motlake says while no major incidents have been reported, preventative education is key.
It's winter time now, and then most of our learners, they are staying in shacks. So this awareness, I think, is going to help them to be aware of any incident that might happen, especially the electrical ones. So, no, there wasn't any major challenges related to the incidents.
He adds that the experience may also empower learners to make safer decisions outside school walls.
The knowledge that they have acquired is going to help them at home. When they come across such incidents, they will be aware of, they will know what to do and what not to do. Because most of our learners, they are stay in shacks and it's winter time, and then if there are such incidents, the way I think they'll be helped. They'll recall what they were taught about at school, and they'll act accordingly.
This awareness drive marks a step forward long-term safety for children growing up in high-risk areas. It also highlights the role of both education and community involvement in shaping safer futures. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The University of Cape Town has played a pivotal role in developing an action plan to combat rising drug-resistant malaria in Africa. This will assist all stakeholders, from governments to healthcare workers on the ground, to follow on a workflow when confronted with the drug-resistant malaria. Malaria is one of the leading causes of death for children under 5 on the continent, despite being preventable and curable. Lyle Phillips reports.
The aim of this action plan is to protect treatment and medicine for the malaria cure to ensure its effectiveness. Senior lecturer at UCT, Dr. Stephanie van Wyk, says this protocol can help determine what medications are available to treat a patient.
So with this protocol, they can inform community healthcare workers, general practitioners, to say that, okay, we see there's a case of malaria in a young child and it's not clearing. This child remains sick. What are the available medications that we can use to treat this patient? How can we look at a regional level? Which areas are hotspots? Which cross-border regions should we be taking a closer look at, taking care that there isn't this large-scale increase of cases? Where should we control the vector, that being the mosquito? Where is more spraying or pesticides needed to really reduce the load of malaria transmission in that region?
Dr. Stephanie van Wyk says that the hope is that this protocol will safeguard the most vulnerable people.
We hope that it will safeguard treatment for the most vulnerable people. We hope that malaria will remain in Southern Africa a completely preventable and treatable disease. We hope to limit the spread of drug resistance and to combat malaria within Southern Africa but also Eastern Africa.
Malaria is spread to humans by some types of mosquitoes through an infection that is caused by a parasite. Clinical research fellow at the University of Cape Town, Dr. Jonathan Gosupika, says there are 2 forms of malaria.
There are 2 forms of malaria. There is what we call uncomplicated and complicated malaria. So it may start as uncomplicated, and if someone doesn't seek health care, it may complicate and damage other vital organs such as the kidneys, the lungs. It may reduce the number of soldiers that are defenders against the diseases, and it may also cause anemia.
Malaria affects over 90% of sub-Saharan African nations and is one of the top 10 diseases that primarily impact children under the age of 5. Kwasupika says, despite preventative measures such as nets and spraying of homes, people are often reluctant to make use of such tools.
The other thing is, if the child is noted to have a fever, if the parents can take that child straight to the hospital so that they can be cared for quickly, I think that can also reduce the burden of malaria. The other thing that I've also noted is that there is delay in seeking health care by these parents for their children, and so this makes the children to have severe forms of malaria.
Drug-resistant malaria is currently not a concern in South Africa and most of its neighbours. Lyle Phillips, SABC News, Cape Town.
Africa World Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Thanks for listening to Africa World Hour. It's a Friday and it's a weekend. And I hope you've started doing what people would normally do on a weekend. If you're not at home resting, listening to your music, maybe you could be having your favorite beverage. I'm Thabiso Lehoko. Thanks for joining us. Thabiso Makwetla will be back on Monday with Africa World Hour. It's goodbye.
Thabiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversation,